you're not here to listen to me, but I have a couple things I want to say. I'm a politician. First of all, how great is this? How great is it for us to be here in this space, in this place, together, breathing the same air, thinking big thoughts, and talking about what we are trying to build together in this community. I think that's an extraordinary thing. I think it's what citizenship is about. And it is what this place is about. And so I am filled with gratitude to John, to Jeremy, to the team for bringing us together, but also to all of you for being willing to spend your Monday night here with us having these big conversations. So for whom is this the first time you've been to this beautiful building? Welcome. I'm so happy. Go to the 4th floor and see the reading room. It's really something. It's my favorite part of the whole building. On the day this building opened, on November the 1st, on time and under budget, those are the mayor's favorite words, I walked into this building for the first time on that morning. I had been offered a lot of tours, and people have said, don't you want to see what the place looks like? Don't you want to sneak peek? And I said, no. I want to walk into this building at the same moment everyone else does. I want to experience it with them, and I want my speech and my reaction to be raw and real and of the moment. So this was a terrible mistake because I was so overcome with this place and with what it took to get this place built that I actually have no idea what I said when I stood on those stairs with the thousands of people. I remember saying we're not starting until everyone gets in because there was a really long lineup. So I don't remember what I said, but maybe I can tell you what I wanted to say that day because I think it's relevant to the conversation that we're going to have today. My love for libraries runs very deep. When I was growing up, I grew up in a family that did not have a lot of money, but had a lot of opportunity. And one of those opportunities was that I got to spend every Saturday afternoon at the Calgary Public Library in the Forest Lawn branch. And the librarians there and the others there always treated this precocious and super nerdy kid with great respect, like they had a stake in me and they had a stake in my success. And for many years, I used to tell the story of how they allowed me to sign out more books every week than was normally allowed. And then shortly after I became mayor, I was at a Calgary Public Library event, and one of the librarians came up to me and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "I meet a lot of people in this new job." And she said, "I used to be the librarian at the Forest Lawn Public Library when you were a kid." And I said, "You always let me sign out more books than was allowed." And she said, "Yeah, it's probably time for you to know. There was no limit. We just told you that." Shattering, again, my story of myself and where I come from. What I wanted to say when this building opened is I wanted to say, look around you. And look at this place and think of the women and men whose strong backs and sweat built this place. And think about what we built here. Because this isn't a library. It's something else. It's a statement about who we are and about what we value. Sometimes people ask me, why is it so nice? Why'd you have to make it so beautiful? And I have an answer to that. And the answer is that I want someone who's just arrived in this country on this land to share this land with us, who has come from perhaps a place of great violence or deprivation or a circumstance that we can't even imagine. I want that person to walk into this building and look at how beautiful it is, and look around and say, is this for me? And the answer is yes, it's for you, because it's for everyone. Because everyone deserves beauty. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves a place where they can belong. Everyone deserves a place from which they can launch their dreams. So this isn't just a library. It's a manifesto. It's a manifesto of who we are as a community and what we believe in and what we will continue to invest in and continue to believe in. Did I mention it was also on time and under budget? Mayor's favorite words. I can't avoid them. And that's why I'm so excited to be here tonight. Because this conversation about the theology of work, about the role of faith in work and in building our communities is a critical and vital discussion that we have to have and we have to continue to have in this community. If you've ever heard me speak to faith groups before, and I love to speak to faith groups, I always say the same thing. I say that we as people of faith have more that unites us than that which divides us. That we as people of faith have a particular responsibility. And that responsibility has to do with those values that bind us. The necessity of service. The need to leave it better than you found it. The dignity of every human being that we're lucky enough to share this land with. Those are the things that drive us, and those are the things that need to continue to drive us. I'm not giving the sermon today. That's John's job. But I can't help a little bit of reminding us that we live in a world right now in this dark times that is characterized by anger and division and hatred and fear. And our job as people of faith is to remind all those around us, all those with whom we're lucky enough to share this land, of the values of compassion and kindness and mercy and love and how we look after one another. Those voices are needed more now than they've ever been needed. And if you've heard me speak to faith groups before, you'll know that part of my personal spiritual practice for the last little while is I've been reflecting on that Franciscan prayer. Prayer often attributed to St. Francis. I won't make you go through it. But it starts with, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And I've been asking myself, how can I be an instrument of that peace? How can my own work and my own toil be in the service of that peace and in the service of that community? But I'll tell you, in the last little while, something to do with this miserable winter we've had, I've added another piece to that spiritual practice, and something that I'm trying to do, and that is to practice awe. And I don't mean awe. I mean awe. I mean being incredibly grateful of the creation around us, the natural creation, and of the work that we wrought as women and men in our community, of what we are able to build together. How great thou art indeed, right? How do we make our souls sing? How do we make sure that we are living in a place of appreciation of one another, but a place where that toil and that work never ends? So that's my greetings from the city. I think I was just supposed to say welcome to the library. I wanted to do a little more than that. Thank you all for being here. John, thank you for doing this, and thank you for taking us through this conversation. I cannot wait to see what happens next. Thank you all.
This new Central Library is arguably the most beautiful building in the city, and if you're first time here, you have to tour the building to know that for yourself. And Mayor Nenshi is right, what he said in that video. It's ours. It belongs to all of us. And we, as a city full of people, a city full of workers, brought this building, this space into being. And because of the work of so many people, taxpayers, civic leaders, planners, designers, engineers, builders, Calgary Public Library staff, you and I are able to be in this space we're sitting together right now. And more than that, because of all the work that goes into building the city of Calgary, you now have a seat. Because where would all of us be without the work of everybody in our community? How would we have light in this space were it not for the NMAX worker I saw 2 weeks ago beside his truck going underground to make sure the underground electrical service to downtown was maintained properly? And how would you have gotten here were it not for city road crews and traffic managers and LRT operators? And how would Stuart Olson, the general contractor, have ever gotten cement to make all the beautiful concrete that fills this building were it not for the cement plant that we pass every time we go to Canmore and on our way out into Banff? The best cement in North America, a friend of mine in the industry says, in this building. And imagine how messy this room would be were it not for the nightly cleaning crews that come into this place and just pick it all up and make it new. Take away the trash and make the room new again. And how would any of us, as part of this city, be healthy were it not for healthcare workers, all those people on the chain of survival that administer healthcare in our city? And how would we ever afford free healthcare in Canada and in our city were it not for the industry that founds Calgary's raison d'etre and reason for being here, for entrepreneurs and engineers and manufacturers and accountants? And how would those leaders have ever learned how to do what they do to make business and economies grow were it not for educators and teachers and people who came alongside them and mentored them and showed them how to do what they do? And the list goes on and on and on and on. This building, this space does not exist were it not for the collective work of all of us here in this city. Without work, none of this would be. And without work, Calgary wouldn't be. So work is a gift, and a gift that I, as a theologian, see coming from God. Work is God's way to fill the world and make more out of it through architecture, agriculture, business, industry, sport, education, science, art, family, and politics. Work is God's way to make a world where human beings can flourish. Work is God's way to take a world that God made and to fill it, and to make it beautiful, and to make it flourish, and to make it all that it can be. A world where human beings who God made can fully be themselves. 2nd century cleric Saint Irenaeus captured it well when he wrote, "The glory of God is a person fully alive, and the life of a person consists in beholding God." And that's the goal of this 3-part Faith and Work series, to help you, to help all of us behold God through the work that you do, so that you can experience God's working presence in a more real and tangible way when you do what you do, when you do the work you do. When you do what God has uniquely wired you and equipped you to do. And through the many ways that you reflect and image the nature of God, your Maker. So tonight we're going to begin that journey by looking at the work of a few workers who came together to build this building, this brand new library, and brought it into being. And by unpacking how they image God through the work that they do, the hope is that you'll do the math and go, okay, if that's how it works for a structural engineer or for an architect or for another worker, this is how it could work for me. So over the past decade, I have researched and preached and written about the ordinary work of hundreds of Calgarians. Scientists, stylists, baristas, engineers, artists, geophysicists, oil sands CEOs, HR managers, teachers, mechanics, florists, judges, landlords, sanitation workers. And through each person's job, I have come to appreciate something unique about who God is. Each person in their own particular work, doing it in their own particular way, taught me something about who God was, something sacred, something holy. Believing that every human being is made in the image of God, which is a big foundational biblical principle, I have been reading people's jobs as though they were literal parables spoken by the God who first conceived of that person and made them the way they are. You and the working you was a thought in the mind of God before you ever came to be, said theologian Abraham Kuyper. Written by a God who, I believe, and from my faith perspective and a Christian worldview, says God who holds and is present to people's lives all the time and held by a God whose hand is explicably and mysteriously, and I don't get it, but guiding creation and life, and your life and my life, and our collective lives as Calgarians, along their intended paths. So as I've researched just a small part of the work that's gone into this building, I've had moments looking at people's jobs, listening as though there was something sacred and holy there, moments where I thought I was glimpsing the mind of God, or the hand or the heart of God. And I know that probably sounds a little mystical. If you've got your free book, you can make a dash for the door if this is starting to sound scary. But let me tell you a few stories of how that's happened for me over the last couple of weeks. One of the first things to strike me about this building, of course, was its stunning beauty. The vibrant, sweeping facade, the incredible western red cedar soffit that you walked beneath as you walked in the main entrance, and the breathtaking interior design when you first look up into that atrium space is enough to bring you to tears. And as I've read and researched, I've heard many stories of people who were brought to tears, architects, reporters, citizens like you and I. And there's something about when a space is just right, when the proportions and the shape and the materials and the color and the feel of a building is as it should be, and that what the building is fits the property and fits its intended use, there's something that makes you feel more human when you encounter a space like that. Makes you feel just right yourself. Like you belong. Like this is your place. This is our place. Like for just a moment, just a fleeting moment, the world is as it should be. In that moment, you feel as though you are as you should be. With your whole being, you feel free and alive and yourself. Renowned philosopher and architect Christopher Alexander writes about a timeless way of building that is thousands of years old and yet is the same today as it has always been. Great buildings and outdoor places are made in this timeless way. They feel natural and just right for their purpose and on time. Alexander writes that almost everybody feels at peace with nature, listening to the ocean waves against the shore, by a still lake, on a field of grass, on a wind-blown heath. One day, when we have learned the timeless way again, we shall feel the same about our towns, and we shall feel as much at peace with them as we do today, walking by the ocean, or stretched out in the long grass of a meadow, or out hiking in K country. When I first entered this building, what he wrote is what I felt. And beauty whispered that truth. And I thought, the architects and the engineers and the designers and everybody who worked on this, they got it right. They got it right. As one First Nations leader told Snaheta architect Craig Dykers, the building feels at home in its place. And when I read those words as a Christian theologian, it's hard not to think about heaven and heaven on earth. The world as God intended it to be, made new, made right again. A beautifully proportioned and perfect city with buildings and walls and green spaces and public spaces and a crystal clear river running right down through the middle of it. I mean, we're already halfway there to heaven on earth in our city. Everything made of the most beautiful and elegant materials, and a place that everyone can call home. And then it struck me that this building makes me feel the way I was made to feel. It carries with it a memory of a world that once was and a foretaste of a world that will one day be. And holding the breadth of that thought in my mind and believing that God made it all, and is making it all new, that God was there at the beginning and will be there at the end, holding all of that in my mind, for just a moment, I got the sense that God is near. The timeless, omnipotent God is near. The God who made a perfect universe had something to do with this near-perfect place. And all the image-bearing workers who came together to make this building happen collectively imaged a creator God who made everything happen. And there's something about the just rightness of this library and how the project came together and how it's being used that is a pointer to the very nature of a creator God. From a Christian perspective, God is a communal God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Theologian John Calvin imagined that each part of the Trinity took on a different role in the act of creation when creation first happened. Calvin wrote that to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, to the Father is attributed the beginning of activity and the fountain and wellspring of all things. To the Son, wisdom, counsel, and ordered disposition of all things. And to the Spirit is assigned the power and efficacy of that activity. And considering this library and what I've learned about the teamwork that brought it to be, I thought you could paraphrase that Calvin quote. To the civic leaders is attributed the beginning of activity and the fountain and wellspring of the idea of a new library. To the architects, planners, engineers, and builders, wisdom, counsel, and the ordered disposition of all constructed things. And to the library board, librarians, and support staff are assigned the power and efficacy of that activity. All of these workers are co-workers in this city, imaging a triune God and building a library. And not only are they imaging a communal God, they're also imaging a gracious, loving, and reconciling God. And when I first encountered the grace in this building, built on that site, I used to be a real estate developer back in Ontario, and this is the site you would look at and then move on, because that was either too expensive to redevelop, or it was undevelopable. I mean, a train track running right through the middle of it, but not even below grade or above grade, but halfway below and halfway above, destined to be a parking lot, transformed into this. This piece of land used to separate two communities. And now that amazing public plaza where the cedar is at the main entrance, that's a bridge. It comes up on this side, is a bridge, and goes down on the other side over these train tracks that used to separate two neighborhoods. A bridge made in the image of a community-bridging God who by nature brings together what was once separate. A God who reconciles human hearts and evidently human neighborhoods. And to think that a building like this is accessible to anyone, as Mayor Nenshi said, and everyone in our city for free, is a deeply, deeply compelling truth. God makes beautiful things out of nothing, and then God invites everyone in to the party for free. And every time you come to this library, you can be reminded, if you're tracking with this faith journey, that is who God is. Every time you're freely welcomed into this space. This building is more iconic than you know. And from a faith perspective, icons were these physical created things, not that you worship. They weren't supposed to be idols, or they weren't God. They were things through which you could experience the presence of God. This building is a iconic pointer to a communally restoring, land renewing, beauty creating, everyone inviting God. And anytime you do the kind of bridging work that the architects and engineers did with this building in your work, when you communally bring things together through the work that you do and make a way for two disparate parties to come together and flourish, doing something necessary, something big, something really small that no one's ever going to see, every time you do that kind of work, you are imaging a community restoring, bridge building, bringing neighborhoods, people, God's world together, God. And even as this library can, in a pretty magnificent way, tell that story, so too can you in your work, doing whatever you do. And it may be very hidden and not seen and not celebrated like this library is, but as a person of faith, the older I get, the more mysterious God is to me. I used to know so much, and I know nothing, increasingly nothing. God is mysterious and beyond our comprehension, and hidden and moving in unseen ways and places I can't even imagine. And even as I believe that everything is held together by God, for the most part I have no idea how, and I rarely notice the fact. Sort of like the structure of this building. Right now, we are sitting in a performance hall that is 10 to 12 meters away from a rail line. 30 feet in that direction. Throughout this talk, trains have been going by. And the reason you're not noticing is the fact that this space was engineered with a box-in-box design to isolate its structure from the rest of the building structure and from the rumblings of those LRT trains. And according to structural engineer Ian Washbrook, this performance hall is actually sitting on big rubber pucks for acoustic and vibration isolation. Have you noticed? And this building is founded on some very huge concrete piles that are 1.7 meters in diameter and over 30 meters, 100 feet deep, so that the building doesn't shake. And there is a massive 55-meter truss, I think, on this side of the building that forms the structure and enables this big column-free space that you went in when you walked in that door, because that truss is there doing its thing. And underneath all that beautifully finished concrete throughout the library, there's steel and more steel hidden there, supporting, making this building work. And as that structural engineer, Ian Washbrook, described the unseen work, all that unseen work in this building. The stuff that he and the intuitive design team put a great deal of thought into, thank God. All I could think about was how his unseen work pointed to the unseen work of God. And maybe to your unseen work. And then I thought about the humility of a structural engineer. I mean, so much of what they do, everything that they do, is often so hidden, rarely out on the surface, to be appreciated or seen by others. Like teachers who teach grade 5 and then the kids go on, you never see them again. You don't know what they do, if they have a life, if they go on, and what difference did you make? Or people who do small jobs or hidden jobs that society somehow undervalues or calls insignificant or less meaningful than an architect or a doctor. And yet it took an engineer's mind made in the image of the God who engineered the cosmos to give you right now the peace of mind to sit here. And I would hazard to guess that there isn't a person in this room who hasn't been, that there isn't a person in this room who's been panicking about the structure coming down on us at any moment in this building, because of the hidden, trustworthy, foundational work of structural engineers. And God is holding us and you vocationally in your life, whatever you're doing and facing right now. And what I find particularly compelling, again, about this particular hall being 10 meters, 12 meters away from a train line, is the fact that there was a way to make it work. There was a way to intimately juxtapose two seemingly disparate uses that enabled both uses to fully flourish, that allowed a performance hall to be a performance hall and a train to be a train. 10 meters away from us. And again, I thought about the brilliance of God, who effectively juxtaposes the most diverse things in order to make the greatest things, like a universe or a university, like a city council or an ecosystem, like your family or your group of co-workers. A triune God in a Christian worldview is by nature unity and diversity. God's good creation by nature is meant to operate as a unity in diversity. And by effectively bringing difference together, God enables a synergy that points to and unveils a glory. So when any of you do the hard work of making different or disparate things fit together, you are reflecting the heart and mind and capacity of your Maker. When you as a child care worker can find a way for those two very difficult and different toddlers to coexist, or when you as a city mayor, that's what they did today. They had a whole day on teamwork and how to work together as counselors and be a good team and be more as a team together. When as a city mayor you can find a way for a group of different counselors to get along, you're reflecting God's heart. When you make the financials fit with the production limitations, when you make room for a disabled person to volunteer and be involved with an abled world, when you find a way for a new idea, something that hasn't happened yet, to fit into an old curriculum or an old business plan. When you do those kinds of things, seemingly disparate things come together. Ask an entrepreneur. That's just what they do. Synergy and boom, and brilliance and newness happen. And when that happens, God is near. Near in terms of you being who you're meant to be, how God made you to be according to original specifications. Near in terms of God being the seen as a worker and God looking at you and delighting in you and delighting in the work that you do and delighting in the impacts on those people or that company or what service you're bringing to the world, and maybe delighting in the whole fact of all of that happening together. Near in terms of God's Spirit actively moving in your life to give you wisdom and perseverance and encouragement to do the work you do. And in those kinds of moments, even as you're facilitating unity and diversity, God is doing the same by drawing you to God's self, a human being to God. And what's so beautifully ironic in all of this is that in order to find the big solution and the best solution for everyone, you need to include everyone in the process. And I heard it again and again and again from everybody I spoke to who was involved with building this building, always pointing to team, to others, self-deferential to a fault. If it wasn't for their contribution and their leadership and their part, we never could have done this. I mean, consider that Western red cedar soffit detail at the main entrance that you walked through. You may have already heard that its sloping design is meant to image, it was inspired by a Chinook arch, like that Chinook arch you saw this morning when you got up. And as I dove into all the complexities and challenges of the engineer-builder-structure craft that they had to face in bringing that slope, the architect Snow Hedda's dream, to fruition, first finding a way to take a product as variable as wood, which is natural and grows and is non-isotropic properties, so it's different this way than it is this way, and comes from different species and bends differently, has different variations in color and texture. To take all of that and work with that product and make it work. And then in trying to discern a shape that is buildable, because you couldn't slope it too much or too little as it got to near the wall where it was going down, otherwise people would hit their heads, and wood can only bend so much. So what is the right curvature for that part? And then come up with 170 prefabricated panels that they built in Vancouver and shipped here and fit together like Legos, this beautiful structural hanging system. And then install them all in a just right way so that it looks like this beautiful, sweeping, contiguous one piece that is so warm and so inviting. It's like a breath of fresh air just to walk through it. And I consider the work of that company working with the structural engineer and the architects. And it strikes me that Snow Hedda's architect, Craig Dykers, and StructureCraft's engineer builders are made in the image of a God who conceived of and created that original Chinook arch that I saw this morning. And what they were doing was godlike. As I packed that trade and engineer builder's work in more detail, I was able to see in more detail why team is crucial for getting greater things done. A big part of the vision that drives StructureCraft is this idea of a master builder. The idea that there can be a master builder who not only can do all of the design, but can do all of the building and is one and the same person or company. And the thinking is that when the design process and the building process play out in a mind and through hands that are already intimately connected, your hands to your brain, or one company tightly woven together, the most efficient, cost-effective, and structurally elegant end products can result. Or as one member of the StructureCraft team, Brian Woutstress, said, in order to build our projects, in order to build something like this, we need to engineer them. And in order to engineer them, we have to have the building experience. They go hand in hand. And when design and build come together and go hand in hand, a lot of the things that divide us or keep us from communal wholeness tend to fall away. Communication is more seamless when you're the architect or you're the carpenter. When a carpenter is adjusting her design or her cut of the wood based on what she's feeling about, getting sensory data from her hands, feeling through her fingers, translated to her brain, redesigning, recutting, reshaping in that moment. There's something about all of that happening in her that makes communication seamless. And vision can be more common. And you can have more patience and endurance because the thing you're struggling to make is the thing you want to make. And when a designer and a builder are one, there is mutual respect and encouragement. It can flow with a company or with an individual or with a group of companies that come together in this group think of being master builders. And again, all of that, as I encountered it in this project, made me feel like God was near. All these people reflecting God's beautiful, communal, master builder heart. And then knowing that that's who God is, and that He's built it all, and that He holds it all, it instilled vocational confidence in me, and can instill vocational confidence in your life. The God who designed and holds the universe together, and everything in our city together. I mean, on your way out, stop and just think about all the businesses and all of the people that fill this downtown. And all of it coming together. And how does that even happen? God surely is trustworthy and has the tools and knows the design and has the capacity to get it built. And again, the lesson then out of that God truth, if you want to experience God at work more, is that every time you depend on another human being and humbly work in community and communicate openly and honestly and freely and submit to others in mutually beneficial ways, like how Jesus did in the Bible, always doing unto others as he would have them do unto you, unto him. And when you do all of that in sync with what the Apostle Paul taught about everything in the world and all of us in the church community, it's like a body. And you grab hold of the truth that you're one part of a body that is the city of Calgary, God's city, made to be as organically integrated as the original ecosystem that was here before the city was built, and made to be as interdependent as a universe and as the God who made the universe. When we work and live in this way, then all of our actions are going to be going with the grain of the universe, and we'll be able to accomplish more than we ever imagined, with more peace and joy and power than we could have ever dreamed of. And the key, again, imaged throughout all of the conversations I had with people to this is humility. A willingness to be attentive and to not be pushy and to listen and to respond and to know that you need others as much as they need you in the successful resolving of a problem or the getting of anything done. I mean, this building, they face so many complex, just on the structural front, things. The encapsulation of that train, and there was so much that went into that. And if the architect or the engineer or the builder were arrogant and had it all figured out coming in, knew all the answers, then how in the world would it ever be possible to come up with the required groupthink for the elegant solution they came up with to come into being? It takes a dance of humility, a godlike dance of communal humility to get great things done. And when we operate in this humble way, we'll be in just the right place to engage a God who operates in that kind of humble way. You want to meet God at work? Act in godlike ways. Near the end of my meeting with Intuitive's structural engineer Ian Washbrook, after he described another instance of the beautiful team effort that went into building the building and how good it was for him to walk through the building knowing the story of the building, which made me think of God walking through everything, knowing the story of everything, him imaging that. But Ian, it was just kind of pulsing out of him, the joy of having been a part of it and the gratitude for this. And I said, Ian, when you talk about that, and you talk about the joy of instilling and mentoring younger engineers to be part of something like this, it's all just so godlike to me. And then I said, quote, to fully know the backstory of the place that you are part of building and to have known enough about who you were to free others to take up their part, to trust other human beings to design and co-build this amazing new thing, and to see God imaged in you. This is on the 16th floor of their conference room of their engineering office, and I'm going on like this. Imaged in you as an engineer, to see your love of seeing the math and the calculus work out and all pulsing out of you, not to get too mystical here in your boardroom, nervous laughter by both of us, but what I just witnessed in you, Ian, is a mind and a heart and capacities that are in sync with God, as I understand God. Wanting everyone to succeed, wanting everyone to find their place, wanting everyone to meet and find meaning and meet and know God through their work. This is all so godlike. And Ian says, it is. And it is. And it is. When I asked StructureCraft engineer Brian Woutster about the biggest challenge in coming up with that slope, he said it was finding the shape. That place where what we want to do and what we can do come together. And then he talked about limitations, hard limitations against the building, soft limitations in terms of the underside, exposed side of that wood. And yeah, we can only do so much with what we have and what we know right now. And as he described it all, it made me think about the God who doesn't have those limitations and could do everything with everything. Well, maybe God does self-limit working in the universe that he made. But a God who walks with us as engineers and designers and builders and workers with the limitations, hard and soft, that we face. God is not limited. God knows the optimal solution for the problem that you're working through at work right now, this week, and the challenges and limits you face. And to know God through the work that you do is to expose yourself to the God who knows what can and needs to be done. And this is really important. Even as a life of faith for many people, Christians or other faiths, is about spiritual and psychological well-being, it is also very much about relational, spatial, and vocational well-being. And even as a wood soffit engineer, builder, or an architect, or anyone else who's worked on this library sought to find the right shape for the contribution they brought to this building, so too each of us needs to be about the same task of finding the right shape and working hard to get it right and to find vocationally who we are. When I asked people, so what did it feel like to walk through the finished product, to finally figure the shape out, to get the structure, to get the encapsulation worked out, the design? And they all talked about the process they went through and how beautiful the struggle was to get there. And then they talked about this beautiful feeling of joy and contentment and structural engineering, Western redwood cedar building, spatial, vocational shalom and peace. The world as it should be. And as they described the joy of their work in so many multiple ways, I couldn't help but think of God's joy in seeing them do all of that work, and God's great joy and feeling when great problems are resolved to make great buildings like this. So how does God feel about the work you do? The aptitudes, the very unique way that you're wired to do the work you do. And the amazing things, the quiet, subtle, beautiful things you achieve through your work. God looks at all that and sees all of that and feels what? He feels the joy that can't help but pulse out of a civic leader after a long day of working through teamwork exercises with his council. Can't help but burst with joy and gratitude for what a city and a group of people like us can make. The heart of God pulsing through the heart of our mayor for good work done in the city of Calgary. So, I'll end with a thank you as a taxpayer, as a citizen, as a contributor to this city of Calgary for the work that you've done to build this new central library. And thank you for listening tonight.